Hi everyone, it's the weekend. I have just finished filming my previous reading vlog, which was trying to find a new favourite crime thriller, and I thought I would just dive straight into the next one. So in this video, what I want to do is try and find a new favourite book based on books that are already favourites. That was a bit convoluted. Basically, sometimes, as I'm sure we all do, I will purchase a book because it reminds me of another book that I've already read and loved. So I've gone through all of the books on my shelves and I've picked out the ones that I have either requested for review or have bought because of that, and I've picked out the respective favourite book that it reminds me of, and I'm going to talk to you about all of them here, and then we'll jump into the reading portion of this vlog where I read as many as possible. I don't think I'll get to all of them, I'm just looking at this huge stack here, but I'll get to as many as we can in the next week or two. The book that reminded me that I wanted to film this video is this, which is The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff. I read this when it was longlisted for the Women's Prize this year and I really loved it. It's about a woman called Gita who lives in a rural village in India, and everyone thinks that she's killed her husband, but she didn't, he just left her. But she feels quite vulnerable as a woman living on her own, so she just allows everyone to think that she killed her husband. But that means that when friends of hers, or supposed friends of hers, would quite like to get rid of their own husbands, they come to her for advice, and she finds herself helping out. I think this book is really funny, but also touches on very serious topics too. It's a good balance of stuff going on. And then that reminded me that I have been reading to read this book for ages. It's been sitting on my shelf for about 4 years, and it's out by Natsuo Kirino, translated from the Japanese by Stephen Snyder, who translates Yoko Ogawa's work. Obviously, I haven't read this one yet, so I don't know how similar it is, but I do know it's about a group of women who work at a factory in Japan. I think they work the night shift, and then one of them accidentally kills her abusive husband one evening and then asks her friends for help covering it up. It's a big beast, this one. And yeah, I'm definitely gonna read this one in this video because it's been sitting on my shelf for a long time. Again, recently, I read Watching Women and Girls by Danielle Pender, which is a short story collection focusing on how women have been conditioned to observe and judge each other's bodies whilst also simultaneously being judged and observed by other people. So that was a recent read. And then a few years ago, I read and loved The Vegetarian by Han Kang, which is translated from the Korean by Deborah Smith. This is about a woman who decides to become a vegetarian. This change angers her husband and her family. We don't hear from her perspective, we hear from those around her, and they are again watching her changing body and judging it. And both of those books combined remind me of a book that I have requested for review recently, and that is Chrysalis by Anna Metcalfe. It is about transformation. It's about a woman who takes herself to the gym and I think changes her body quite radically. She also leaves her family. I don't know if we hear from her perspective. I know we hear from her mum, someone at the gym who's been watching her, and a work colleague too. So these two books combined seem to produce something like this, so I'm very keen to read it. Next, I have been trying to find a book like this for ages, which is a book that I love that talks about the mundanity of work and explores capitalism, office culture. And the first book that I really liked, which isn't office-based but is talking about the repetitive nature of work, is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, which is translated from the Japanese by Jenny Tapley Takamori. It's about a woman called Kiko who works in a convenience store and actually enjoys the repetitive nature of this work. In a similar vein, I've read The Factory, which I didn't enjoy, and I also read There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job, which wasn't my cup of tea either. I've been looking for another book that would really tick all these boxes for me. I also love the TV show Severance, and whilst that has a sci-fi element, it is also about office work and that being examined and hyperbolized in a way that becomes super uncomfortable. A book that I'm hoping might fill that void is Temporary by Hilary Leichter. This says, "There is nothing more personal than doing your job. So goes the motto of The Temporary, a female worker who takes job after job in search of steadiness, belonging, and something to call her own. Aided by her bespoke agency and a cast of boyfriends, each allotted their own task, the handy boyfriend, the culinary boyfriend, the real estate boyfriend, she is happy to fill in for any of us. For the chairman of the board, a ghost, a murderer, a mother, even for you, even for me." It sounds super weird, and I'm very much looking forward to getting to it. Then, A non-fiction book that I read a couple of years ago and absolutely loved was Tiny Moons, A Year of Eating in Shanghai by Mingya Powles. I think I first came across her in the Daunt Books essay collection on swimming at Hampstead Ladies Pond. And then I read this, and then I read her poetry, and I've basically just loved everything that she has written. But this is about Nina spending a year in Shanghai and about the food that she ate when she was there and describing the scenery, and it was just so evocative and wonderful. It's published by Emma Press. Emma Press recently brought out this, which reminds me of Nina's book. It is called How Kyoto Breaks Your Heart by Florentyna Leow, and this is about Florentyna moving to Kyoto. She's lived in various different places. So she was born in Malaysia, lived in London, and then in Kyoto before moving to Tokyo. Thematically, I think these are going to have really interesting things to say to each other. Nina is from New Zealand and is of Malaysian Chinese heritage. Moving to Shanghai, especially eating the food there, was a way to explore that heritage further. Florentyna is Malaysian, and I believe when she moved to Japan, people would often mistake her for being Japanese. She's obviously not Japanese, but that meant she was living in this in-between space where she wasn't always immediately seen as an outsider, and that's a strange position to be in. So I'm really, really excited about this one. I think I'm going to start with this first. Next, one of my favourite books of all time is Poor Things by Alasdair Gray. It is a wacky book about a man called Godwin Baxter, who claims to have found this woman, Bella, who has died by suicide, was pregnant, and he decided to take the brain of her unborn baby and put it inside her skull and resurrect her. It has Frankenstein references, Jane Eyre references. It is also a play on Beauty and the Beast as well, and the real lives of Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley. It is a bonkers delight. It's also being made into a film by Yorgos Lanthimos, and I think that's coming out later this year. I've been anticipating that for ages. The trailer just came out and it's not what I expected. It's all bright colours, but it does seem to be really surreal and odd, which would fit in with this book. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the adaptation of that has been handled. If anyone can do it, Yorgos can. Then last year I bought this book, which is Orpheus Builds a Girl by Heather Parry, and one of the reasons that I purchased it was because it did remind me of Poor Things by Alasdair Gray. It's about a man called Willem von Tor who is dying. It says, as he looks back on his life, he reflects on his upbringing, his beloved grandma, and his medical career during the Second World War. But above all, he remembers his darling Lucy, the great love of his life, the dark-haired beauty who appeared to him in a dream years before they met. So I think that he brought her back to life. And then there's also the voice of someone else in this book who is contesting what he's saying. And in Poor Things, there are lots of layers of narrative where characters argue with each other over what the truth is. So I'm hoping that something similar is going on here. As you know, if you've been here a while, Notes on a Scandal by Zoe Heller is also one of my favourite books. And I am constantly trying to find books that remind me of it. I read The Woman in the Purple Skirt, which had a similar feel at the beginning, but ultimately I didn't fall in love with it. But there are 3 books on my TBR which could potentially be similar to this. We've got Mrs. S by Kay Patrick. This is a book that has been compared to Notes on a Scandal and The Secret History. It is about 2 teachers, one of whom becomes obsessed with the other, which is what happens on Notes on a Scandal. I should have said that. That's about a teacher called Barb who becomes obsessed with a younger teacher called Sheba and writes about her obsessively in her diary, then finds out a secret about her and then uses it as leverage. The film with Judi Dench and Cate Blanchett is also wonderful. So yeah, this is about a new teacher who comes to a boarding school and then becomes obsessed with another teacher who works there. Then this next one was a recommendation from one of you. I had to get it shipped over from Australia because you can't buy it here. This is A Good Winter by Gigi Fenster. The blurb says, when Olga's friend Lara becomes a grandmother, Olga helps out whenever she can. After all, it's a heavy burden on Lara caring for her bereaved daughter and her baby grandson. And the new mother is not exactly considerate. She's taken to her bed and all but rejected her little boy. But simmering beneath Olga's sensible support and loving generosity brews a deep jealousy, the need to be the centre of Lara's attention and affection, a need that soon becomes all-consuming, deluded and dangerous. So definitely sounds Notes on a Scandal-esque. And the final one in this pile of Notes on a Scandal also links in with the next favourite book that I'm going to talk about. It kind of bridges the two. This is A Touch of Jen by Beth Morgan, which is about two women who are obsessed with another woman that they follow on Instagram. They know all about her life, and then one day they meet her in person, and I think end up going to a party that she's at. So it does have notes on a scandal feelings, but it also reminds me of I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel, which is a book again that I read when it was on the Women's Prize long list and loved. It's about someone who's obsessed with a man who she calls the man I want to be with, and that man in turn is obsessed with a woman who she calls, what does she call her? I think it's just the woman I am obsessed with. Yes, the woman I am obsessed with, and she follows them unhealthily online and knows all about their lives, and it's super, super toxic. So this could also be like A Touch of Jen, but I have two other books that could also be like I'm a Fan. We've got the Subtweet by Vivek Shraya. This is about two women who are musicians, and I think that the pressure on their careers means that they start to drift apart or maybe even attack each other, and then there is a tweet which is a subtweet which causes a lot of drama. And then the final book on this pile of books is this one, which I've been meaning to read for a while and then was reminded of its existence when I met up with Lauren a couple of weeks ago for a walk because she was reading it. And this is Rin Usami's Idol Burning, translated from the Japanese by Asa Yanida. This is about someone who is obsessed with a Japanese pop star and knows all about him, every aspect of his life, and then this scandal comes out that says that this pop star has assaulted a female fan, and it's about how she deals with that, which sounds really intriguing. So those are all the books on my TBR. How many do we have? Okay, that's 10 books. I don't think I'm gonna get to all 10 in this video. Quite a lot of reading to be doing, but I'm really excited about these because they're books that I just have such a good feeling about because they remind me of other favourite books. I suppose on the other hand, maybe I'm going to be judging them quite harshly. If they are similar to favourites and they're not at that level, that may be quite disappointing. So it could go either way, really. I will read as many as I can in the next couple of weeks, and I'll talk to you about them. And as usual with my reading vlogs, I'll be taking you on some walks, we'll do some cooking, possibly see how it all goes, and in between those segments I'll talk to you about what I've read so far. I think I'm going to start with How Kyoto Breaks Your Heart. We're about to walk over to Mr. M's mum's house because she's away for the night, and we're going to go over and feed Penny Slow the tortoise, let her out for a run around, and I will show you some footage of her garden because it's always so beautiful, and of Penny as well. And I'll come back when I have read something. I'll speak to you later. It's the next day, and just as I pressed record, Lola decided that that was the time to do the stinkiest dog fart known to humanity, didn't you? She's like, don't shame me on the internet. Why are dog farts the worst? Anyway, hi. Did I need to tell you that? Possibly not, but here we are. I have finished reading a book. I read How Kyoto Breaks Your Heart by Florentyna Leow, and I really loved this. I thought it was, I don't know, one of those books that feels like it's giving you a hug. This is about Florentyna moving to Kyoto, and she moves because a friend asks if she wants to move in with her because her housemate has just left and she can't afford to pay the rent on her own. And she also says, do you want to come and work for the company that I'm working for? So it's quite an intense situation. She's moving into this place with this person, they're living together but also working together. And we know from the beginning that things turn sour and she ends up breaking up with this friend. And I'm often asked for books that deal with female friendship, and there aren't a whole lot of them, and this book really does a brilliant service to friendship in that it is treating it with as much weight as you would a romantic relationship. This breakup, she talks about it at the beginning, saying that she and her friend just stopped talking and she doesn't really know what happened. And this whole book is an interrogation into why perhaps their friendship fell apart. And I thought that that was really wonderful. So if you've been looking for a book about female friendship, then I do recommend this. It's told in a series of vignettes, which makes it feel as though it's like a stack of postcards that you've been receiving one by one, and it really is evocative of Kyoto. Let me read a bit to you. How would you describe something you've never eaten before? I had no frame of reference for this fruit. A persimmon, a just ripe persimmon off our street was sweet, crisp, honey-like. When its flesh ripened even further, becoming soft and pulpy, it tasted like an autumn mango. Hints of toasted brown sugar and dates and a dash of cinnamon. It tasted like the sound of a clarinet, silky, mellow and warm. I assumed all persimmons could be eaten straight off the tree. I didn't know that hundreds of varieties existed or that they fell broadly into astringent and non-astringent types. Later I found out the hard way that an underripe astringent persimmon tastes like 1,000 green bananas and turns your tongue into a shag rug for half an hour. It's just full of paragraphs like that and all of this linking imagery. So at the beginning she's talking about turning these persimmons into jam and how she puts so much effort into it for quite a small amount of gain, and then she's contrasting that with other things that she does in her life, how much effort she puts into those things and then what the result of that effort is and whether it's worth it. And she talks about being a tour guide and how she both loved it and then came to detest it because she was, I guess, a tourist in Kyoto too, but given that she lived there for a prolonged period of time, she felt as though she had this elevated status, and then she would get really frustrated with the tourists that were just coming there for the week, but could also see the irony in that. One of these sentences I underlined because I thought it was beautiful. The woman joining the solo tour had long flyaway hair, an absent dreamy smile, and a sigh like a balloon slowly deflating. Another ironic thing that she discusses in this book is how she felt as though at one point she wanted to express herself on social media, and then she berated herself for that and she thought, I don't need to do that, I can keep things to myself. She says, not everything needs to be for public consumption, some things can just be yours alone. This seems obvious now, but it was difficult to internalize as someone whose instinct was to share, to over-explain, to help if asked. What reigned in my instincts was then the desire to hide, to keep the sanctity of my space intact, to avoid unexpected encounters with anyone from my real life. We all have our own corners of the earth that we run to, but of course she's discussing all of this in a book that is then something that other people can read. And I thought that that was all rather delightful. I really adored this book, and I will say that I think that part of that is probably because I've been to Kyoto and therefore I could picture the places that she was talking about. But I think I still would have loved it even if I hadn't been to Kyoto. I was just thinking actually when I went there, we'd been to Japan twice, once in 2015 and once in 2018. And the first time that we went, I didn't vlog it, but I put some clips to music, and I'll dig around on the computer and see if I can find some of that. It's probably going to look like I filmed it on a potato because phone cameras have just come so far since then. But I will insert some Japan footage here if I can find it. in a way, I wish that I'd filmed when we'd gone in 2018 as well, but I didn't. We were on our honeymoon, so I didn't film anything. I did take some photos. Maybe I'll insert some photos here as I chat. The first time we went in spring, and then the second time we went in autumn, and I actually much preferred it in the autumn with all the maples. I mean, the cherry blossom is beautiful too, but I think that given autumn is already my favourite season, Japan just does autumn so well that it was an absolute joy. Anyway, also in this book by Florentyna, she talks about getting matcha ice cream from a place in Kyoto called Tsuzuri, which is definitely a bit of a tourist trap. It does beautiful soft serve matcha ice cream. And I'm not a huge ice cream fan, I think just because I have really sensitive teeth, but I remember loving that ice cream, and it made me really hungry when I read that passage in here where she was talking about that ice cream. And I said that to Mr. M, and he said, you know that you can get that in London, right? They have a Tsuzuri here now too. And I did not know that. I did not know that. So I thought today what we could do is go and get some of that ice cream and go for a walk. So let's definitely do that. But yeah, I would wholeheartedly recommend this book. If you have read Nina's book Tiny Moons and love that, I think you would like this. If you have read things like Names for the Sea by Sarah Moss, I think you will also really like this. I can definitely see myself rereading it because there were so many passages that I underlined because I thought that the writing was really stunning. So excellent. I am going to go for this walk, and I'm going to take you with me. I'm just dropping things on the floor. Let's go see if we can find this ice cream place from Kyoto in London. Let's go. Okay folks, so we've had some mixed results. They were all out of matcha ice cream, which was very sad, but I had vanilla instead and it was still very nice. And now I've walked up to the Heath and I walked past a bookshop. And a couple of weeks ago, I went for a walk with Lauren over at Lauren in the Books, and she is going on her honeymoon to Norway soon. And she was saying that she really wanted a book like Names for the Sea by Sarah Moss, which is about Iceland, about Norway, and she was bemoaning the fact that she doesn't live near a Daunt Books. And Daunt Books is great because it arranges everything by country, so you can go to, say, the Norway section and you can find all the translated Norwegian fiction, but also books set in Norway too. Today I walked past a Daunt Books, so I decided to put my mask on and go inside and have a quick look in the Norway section, and I found something that I think fits the bill, so I bought that for her as a present, and I'll show it to you when we get home because it's a bit windy out here and you might not be able to hear me talking very well. But yeah, I'm on the Heath now. It's very beautiful. Let's continue with our walk. Hi, it's the next day, it's the evening, it's after work, and because I didn't show you in the last clip, this is the book that I picked up for Lauren. It's called The Cabin in the Woods. No, it's not. It's called The Cabin in the Mountains by Robert Ferguson, and I hope it's good. I have no idea. It's about Robert moving to Norway in 2016 with his wife and building a wooden cabin home and learning about the history of the wheat and how he's integrating into society there and culture, landscape, all of that. And the thing that also drew me to it is that it starts at Christmas. And if you follow Lauren on her channel, you know that she loves Christmas. Yeah, it starts on the 21st of December 2018. It was about 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon and snowing heavily as we pulled up outside the cabin after the 2-hour drive from Oslo. The sky had hardly opened its eyes all day and already it was closing them. The last half hour of the journey was a heart-stopping series of bends along a country road considered too insignificant to be regularly cleared by the snowplows that chugged up and down the main roads like giant insects. So yeah, I'm hoping it's good. I have literally no idea. If she doesn't like it, I obviously won't be offended. All right, a book that sadly wasn't for me, going back to the books that I'm reading in this vlog. I tried Temporary by Hilary Leichter, and this was the one that I was hoping would be like There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job, but a book that I liked more than that. And I really liked the premise of this book. So it's about a woman who has lots of temporary jobs, and she's told that to increase her permanence, she must be more temporary more often. Like the more she does and the more different ways of existing mean that she will be a more real person. And in her personal life, she has temporary boyfriends who are, I guess, doing the same thing for her. She can't commit to something permanent at home because of the emphasis on her work life. So she has lots of different people around her who can attend to different things. It's quite surreal and also very satirical. And if I was going to do book maths on it, which may not be helpful unless you are very familiar with the things I'm going to mention, but I would say it's like if Elif Batuman, who wrote The Idiot, if she had written something like Synecdoche, New York, all of these meta layers. I like the premise, and I think it would be really wonderful for me personally as a long short story, but I could already feel myself waning a part of the way through the book, which is why I've decided to part ways with it. I feel like, okay, I get the premise, it's funny, but I don't need to sit here for a whole novel and read the rest. At least I'm not feeling the urge to do so. So I'm gonna put this one down. All right, I'm gonna move on to the next book, and I will talk to you about it when I have read some of it. Hi, it is a couple of days later and I have read a few things. So firstly, I have started and finished this, which is Orpheus Builds a Girl by Heather Parry. And this is the one that I bought because I hoped it was going to be a little bit like Poor Things by Alasdair Gray. And now having read it, there are maybe a few similarities, but the execution is really different. So let me talk a little bit about Poor Things and why it's one of my favourite books, because it's been a while since I have spoken about it. Poor Things is a political satire. It has a layered narrative where the characters are arguing with each other about what the reader should believe as truth. There are a lot of hyperbolized, ridiculous things happening in it that are presented as science, and that's tongue-in-cheek and reflecting Gothic literature of the Victorian times, such as Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is of course a novel, but was using scientific discussion of that time to present something that maybe could be seen as plausible. It's a bit of a collage of a book which reflects Frankenstein, both in the way that book is written, but also as if this book was a series of body parts that have been sewn together quite clumsily, and is using real historical figures as a basis for the main thread of the story. People like John Hunter, who was a surgeon who used to experiment on dead bodies, and then taking it quite far away from real life. I really, really love it, and if you haven't read it, I would really recommend picking it up. Orpheus Builds a Girl by Heather Parry is very different because this is also based on real life people and based on a scientist who would do strange and questionable things to people, but it sticks very much to the plot of that person's life. And because I already knew the person that she was writing about, I think that that hampered my enjoyment because I didn't discover anything knew in inverted commas I did, because I was exploring people's emotions and the language is very beautiful, but I knew the plot of this and I knew where it was going, and therefore nothing in that regard surprised me. So if the premise of this book sounds like it's really up your street and you don't know anything about Karl Tanzer, don't look him up. Don't look him up, just read this book, because I think then you will like it a whole lot more, because the plot will surprise you, because it does go to weird places. But if you've read the history of this person, you already know what strange and awful places this book is going to. Because of that, I don't want to talk about the plot too much. Yes, it's following the life of Karl Tanzer. In this book, he is called Willem von Tor. He's born in Germany in 1919. And at the beginning, he's living with his mother and his grandmother, and he loves his grandma a lot, and he's very distraught when she died. And there were parts of that that reminded me of John Burnside's The Dumb House, when he becomes a bit obsessed with the moment of death and the moment that a soul leaves a body, and he starts to research how you might be able to bring someone back to life, or at least preserve someone's body in a way that would mean you could bring them back to life when that scientific knowledge was acquired. So we get a chapter from him, followed by a chapter from a woman called Gabriella, who says that she is Lucy's sister. Lucy is a woman who Willem von Tor believes that he is destined to be with, and we know from the beginning of the book that Lucy is dead. And Gabriella says that this is Wilhelm's story, he wrote it down on his deathbed, and it makes her really angry because it misrepresents her sister. So she is there in the chapters in between his to give her side of events and to balance things out. There are harmonies between their sections. Gabriella talks about her love for her grandmother. Willem von Tor also, as I said, talked about the love for his grandmother. But then we have the juxtaposition of their different political situations. Gabriella is growing up in Cuba just before the revolution, and Willem von Tor was born in Germany in 1919, and we see him growing up going to Hitler Youth. It's not explicitly said that it's Hitler Youth, but it's very obvious that that is what it is supposed to be. As the novel progresses, these characters get closer and closer to each other until they start interacting, as you know they're going to from the very beginning of the book. So they begin at opposite sides of the world, and then they meet somewhere in the middle. And when Wilhelm meets Lucy, he talks about her in a way that reflects what's going on in the world at the time. He talks about her as though he's conquering her. He wants her to be part of his empire. And it is very disturbing in places. If you have read The Dumb House by John Burnside, I think you would like this. It definitely has Frankenstein elements, but all of the stuff that happens in this book is something that happened in real life. And because, as I said, I knew what was going to happen, that lessened my enjoyment of it, but I did appreciate the writing style. So if this book appeals to you, then I would definitely recommend picking it up. And now I am reading A Touch of Jen by Beth Morgan. This is the one that I said I thought might be a little bit like Notes on a Scandal and I'm a Fan. I definitely think that it's closer to I'm a Fan, having read the beginning of it. And I think in the introduction I said that it was about two women who were obsessed with this woman called Jen. It's actually a couple. And Remy, who was one half of this couple, Remy and Alicia, Remy used to know Jen, he used to work with her, and he's clearly obsessed with her, and his obsession with her has meant that Alicia has become infatuated with her too, and their whole relationship revolves around imitating Jen, quoting what she's posting on Instagram, and also mocking what she's doing online. Taking her down makes them feel better, but at the same time they want to be her, and she is filling the void that they have in their relationship where their own identity should be. And it's really unsettling and also quite sad at the same time. So I'm really intrigued by this. It's also very, very funny in places. For instance, at one point Remy wants to contact Jen, but then he looks at their message exchanges, and the last time he messaged her she didn't reply, so he's too embarrassed to message her on that platform, and thinks, okay, well I should message her on a different platform because then she can't see our previous messages and she won't think that I'm desperate. And then at another point, Alicia and Remy are having a conversation. It says, Remy sees the pile of wood in the alcove when he gets home and asks Alicia what the deal is. I think you know what it's for, she says. Remy vaguely recalls some mention she made of an art project. She's brought it up several times, but he thought that like all of her projects towards self-actualization, it would never really materialize. Can you afford to spend money on this? He said. Maybe I'm refusing to allow money to hold a tyrannizing position in my life, Remy. So yeah, this book has a lot of cutting remarks as well as a lot of overthinking. Like with I'm a Fan, a lot of very realistic and relatable things, but then right next to very over the top, dramatic, can't believe what you're saying things, which just makes you very discombobulated, which is not a word I've said in a long time. Discombobulated. Anyway, I'm liking it. I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I will finish it and then we'll find out where it's going. I have been craving, just to change the subject entirely, I recently have been craving a meatball sub. I have no idea why, and I would like to make one. I don't have time to make one today, but I'm going to make one for lunch tomorrow, so I will insert footage of that here. And for anyone who's wondering, because I'm asked quite a lot what my favourite non-meat mince is to make stuff like this, my favourite is the Meatless Farm mince. But anyway, yes, I'm going to get back to work now, but I will film me making this thing I've been craving for so long tomorrow, and I will insert footage of that here, and then I'll come back and talk to you about A Touch of Jen when I'm done. Also, it's weird that I keep talking about Jen, because obviously that's a character in this book, but then obviously I know that it's my name and both of us are online, and that's kind of weird. Anyway, goodbye. Why am I sitting on the floor of my office instead of on the chair? I don't know, but I've pressed record now and here we are. That sandwich was delicious, and now I have lots of frozen bread to use in the future, which is very nice. I finished reading A Touch of Jen. What is this book? What is it? You know, you say a book is a tale of two halves. This really is a tale of two halves. I loved the beginning of it, and I thought it just went elsewhere at the end. It was deliberately doing that, but I'm not sure that I loved that journey. So the first half is about Remy and Alicia and Jen, and them getting really uncomfortably close to her and not really liking the reality of her and preferring the projection that they have of her in their head. Jen is in a relationship with a man called Horace who isn't online at all and has also dismantled all the security cameras, doesn't like being observed, so they are opposites. And then the second half of the story, I can't delve into in much detail because a huge plot point happens that I don't want to spoil. But essentially the first part of the book is about Remy and Alicia together, and then in the second half of the book we are following one of these characters and how the whole book changes and pivots based on the media that this character is absorbing. So the first half of the book is all about Jen because that's what they're looking at, it's what they're parroting. There's also a literal parrot in this book, just in case we didn't get that imagery, which is also quite funny. And then in the second half of the book, Remy is watching a lot of horror films with a lot of violence, and therefore the book turns into a horror film. It's like that media steps into his life and becomes actualized in the same way that Instagram did in the first half of this book. And it just gets ridiculous. And I didn't like that when I was reading it, but I have to admit, I've been thinking about it a lot. So I'm not sure quite where that leaves us. Perplexed, I think, is where it leaves us. Yes, not going to be a new favourite, but I also haven't read anything quite like it before, so for that, you know, I have to give it something. Then I tried to read Mrs. S by Kay Patrick, which is the book that I hoped was going to be a little bit like Notes on a Scandal by Zoe Heller. It's about a woman who joins this boarding school as a matron and becomes obsessed with the headmaster's wife. But the writing style in here, I just really didn't enjoy it. There are loads of really short sentences, and I think that that can be very effective when you're trying to build tension, when you're wanting the reader to read things really quickly. But when it's used a lot, you don't get that effect anymore, or at least I don't feel it. So here's an example. It looks difficult, full stop. Pointless, full stop. I did not know Latin could still be learned, full stop. Open exercise books, full stop. They are not talk, full stop. They don't wear uniforms, full stop. A freedom they use against me, full stop. An arm is raised, full stop. Plastic bangles colliding, full stop. Yes, I say yes, full stop. So yeah, I just found that quite, I don't know, frustrating. Which is a shame. So I don't think I'm going to continue with this one, at least not in this video. I might pick it up on another occasion and see if on that particular day I'm more into that writing style. But I'm going to put this one down for now. And at the moment, I am in the middle of Out by Kirino, which is translated from the Japanese by Stephen Snyder. I am obsessed with this book. This book is so good. It's one of those books where I feel like I can't even really talk to you about the language that's being used or the images that are being generated. It's just a really good story. It's about these women who work at a factory. They do the night shift. They make all of these lunch boxes and they have difficult family lives. So one of them is looking after their mother-in-law. One of them is sleeping in a different room to her husband and her son doesn't speak to her anymore. One of them has an abusive husband and one has no money and has been spending all of her money on things that she doesn't really need. And then the person who has an abusive husband who has been gambling and spending all the money that his wife is making, she gets really, really angry and she kills him one evening, and then she calls one of her other friends and says, look, I've done this thing, can you please help? And everyone comes together and it's very much motivated by money, not really because of the way that they feel about each other. Every character is very suspicious. It's very, very gruesome because they decide they're gonna have to cut up his body to dispose of it. This happens very early on in the book. And I won't say more regarding the plot because why would I? Because you should read it. It's a thriller and you should find out what unfolds yourself. But I am so gripped in these women's lives. I love all the details that are being described. I mean, even the disgusting ones, but I like that it's taking its time. I like that this author realizes that she has captivated you and that you're willing to spend time learning about the ins and outs of all of these people. I mean, literally ins and outs of people when it comes to dead bodies. But yeah, I don't really want this book to end. I don't know where it's going. I sense probably not somewhere good because they have made some mistakes when it comes to getting rid of this man's body. And I'm sure that someone is going to discover that soon enough. But yeah, loving this so much. I'm going to go now and finish reading it and I'll talk to you about it later. Friends, a travesty has occurred. It was me just minding my own business, reading Out and thinking this is going to be one of my top 3 books of the year. This book is so good. And then the last 100 pages happened and I don't know what the end of this book was trying to do. So we're following these 4 women who are trying to stand up to male violence and they're going about it in a very violent way themselves and they're not handling things appropriately. That's not the point. Like, the point is that this is the out that they see for themselves, like that we're going to become monsters. We're going to do this too. You've put us in this corner and that's what we're going to become. And you're rooting for them even though they're doing terrible things. And there is a huge feminist element to this story. And then the last 100 pages are really male gazy, and there's a huge amount of awful sexual violence. And I wasn't sure if the story was ending up in that place because these women had become the men that they despise. I don't think that that was the message of the book. I just found myself trying to make excuses for why this ending was happening and why the tone felt so different from the beginning. I'm still trying to do it, as you can probably hear. Like, maybe the tone was so different, maybe it became so monstrous because of the actions that they did. Again, I still don't believe that, but I just really want to give this book some kind of redemption. And it left me feeling so flat and so sad because I'd loved the beginning of it, or the majority of this book so much, the first 4/5 of it. And then I went online and I read reviews, and nearly every single review is, I love this book, what was that trash ending? I don't know if something's been lost in translation or if the ending of this book is just not that great. There's a difference between not enjoying something and thinking it is objectively bad, but I do feel both of those things about the ending of this book. I would like to just kind of rip out the last 100 pages and erase them from my brain and just focus on the first 400. I'm conflicted now because I still actually want to include it on my favourite books of the year, but with a caveat. Maybe it can have an honourable mention or something. I don't know. If you have read this book, how do you feel about it? I have looked up other books by her, and there's one about a group of teenage girls who I think also get embroiled in this violent situation, and I would like to pick that up and see if it's different. I don't know. I would love to know your thoughts if you have read it. Then I read Idle Burning by Rin Uzumi, which is translated from the Japanese by Asa Yanida, and this is definitely going to be one of my favourite books of the year. I thought that this book was brilliant. It's about a high school student called Akari who is obsessed with a member of this pop band who she calls her Oshi, and there is repetitive imagery of the sea and of fluidity and of the colour blue which floats through this entire novel. She links her online life and his online life and her real life, in inverted commas, using this colour blue to help everything make sense around her. And the way that the internet is talked about in this book is brilliant. She says, everything Narumi said was straightforward and her facial expressions changed like she was switching out profile pictures. I didn't think she was being fake or insincere. She was just trying to simplify herself as much as possible. Akari is going through something and we don't really know what that thing is. It's hinted at that it may be a chronic illness. And just to insert myself into the narrative here a second, I really resonated with that part of the story. Falling into fandom as a way to expand on your life if you, for instance, in my case, have a disability, and that means that you're not having the same life as your peers. And that's what Kari's doing here. If it is a chronic illness that she has, they reference doctors and her not being the same as other people. I thought that that was really realistic. She says here, it was more than a core, it was my backbone. I could see that normal people fleshed out their days with schoolwork and activities and part-time jobs that gave them money to go out with friends or to the movies or to eat or buy clothes which enriched their lives. I was moving in the opposite direction. My entire experience was increasingly concentrated into this backbone, as if I was going through some kind of ordeal to purify myself. Everything that was unnecessary fell away until my spine was all that was left. She talks about how she is obsessed with this man having this one-sided relationship with a famous person so that the space couldn't be destroyed by interacting directly and the relationship could not be ruined by anything that I did. That really spoke to me. I was so invested in fandom as a teenager and in investing lots of time and energy into writing fan fiction and investing lots of emotion into something that couldn't communicate back with me. I thought that that was explored so well in this book, the link between disability and fandom. Obviously, it goes beyond that because this is a novel that is pushing the boundaries of those things and it goes into deeper territory. But the core of this and everything that the novel was based around felt extremely true. Akari's world is completely shaken when at the beginning of this book she discovers that her Oshi has been accused of sexually assaulting a female fan. It breaks all of the rules of fandom as I discussed from reading out that quote, she loves it because it's something she can invest her emotion into like a black hole, and it's not supposed to communicate back with her. It's supposed to exist on this ethereal level. And if something very real and horrible comes out of that, that completely breaks the spell, or at least she feels like it should. She knows she shouldn't love him anymore if he has done this horrible thing. But the point is that he was never who he actually is in her brain. She was having a relationship with a fictionalized version of him, and that fictionalized version of him in her head has not done the horrible thing. It's so complex, and I thought it was so moving because it's never about the man that she's obsessed with. It's about herself and her creating this safe bubble for herself when everything else around her feels unmanageable. This book brilliantly gets into the mind of what it's like to be a teenager, or just to be in general someone who is obsessed with a certain something, be that music or books or whatever, and how that outlet can really help sustain you when you're in a situation like having a chronic illness or a disability that separates you from those around you in your life. And as I said, the way that it talks about the internet is wonderful. She relates people's expressions to emojis all the time because that's the filter that she sees the world through. I thought it was brilliant, and I would thrust it into the hands of pretty much everybody, to be honest. So I'm very glad that I love this one after being confused about the ending of the last book. We're back on an upward trajectory, which is a good place to be, and I hope that that continues. Hello, I haven't been filming these last few days, but I have been reading, and this is going to be the final clip. And I said at the beginning, I didn't think I was going to get to all of these books, but guess what? I got to all of the books, so I can talk to you about all 10. So I've read the final 3. Then I want to just chat about how successful this was, because I think it was quite successful. I have to say that I'm having a really good reading year this year. I'm reading a lot, and that's not always for good reasons. It's to help me cope with other difficult things that are going on in the background. But the reading itself is going well, and I have read a lot of books this year that have been books that I've fallen in love with. I've definitely discovered new favourites. I've also read some that I really haven't enjoyed, but overall, I think this is the best reading year I've had maybe ever on this channel, like since I've really started documenting all of my reading, which is very exciting. And end of June will be best books of the year so far, so we can get more into that then. But let's concentrate on this video first. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So I've read the final 3 books. One of them I didn't love so much as the other ones, so I'll just briefly talk about that. And that was A Brief Winter by Gigi Fenster. This was a book I was hoping was going to be a bit like Notes on a Scandal by Zoe Heller. And it was. I think that tonally it was quite similar. It's definitely about an older woman who is obsessed with another woman, and you're hearing everything from her point of view, and you're not sure how truthful she's being, because she deliberately misinterprets what other people say to her. For instance, imagining that they're inviting her into their house and that they want her to be there. She twists the situation to make it look as though she is or can be seen in a more favourable light. And I did enjoy that in this book. It is creepy, but it lost a little bit of momentum for me, and then the ending was really, really quick, and also was a little bit surreal is the wrong word, but the whole book is written very matter-of-factly, and then the ending is a little bit verging on abstract, so that it doesn't want to explicitly say what is going on. And I think I would have preferred it if the tone had remained the same. I think that would have been more chilling, or maybe that just says something about me and how twisted I am. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's about a woman called Olga who's obsessed with another woman who lives in her apartment block called Lara. Lara has been looking after her daughter because her daughter's husband recently passed away and she's just given birth to a baby. So Olga inserts herself into their family life, and as the novel progresses, you start to find out more about Olga's family when she was young. And yes, I liked it, but I did not love it. Then the last two books I really did love. One of those was Chrysalis by Anna Metcalfe, which I hoped would be a little bit like Watching Women and Girls by Danielle Pender and The Vegetarian by Han Kang, and I was right on both counts. In fact, I think this is deliberately referencing The Vegetarian in places because the character does imagine what it might be like to turn into a plant, and you do hear from 3 different characters' perspectives, but not the main woman who the whole book is focused on. So in this book, we're following 3 characters, Elliot, Bella and Susie. Elliot is a man who has a very erratic job. Sometimes he'll have a lot on his plate and he won't leave his apartment for weeks at a time. And then he'll go through a lull period and then it will continue again. And every time he's in a really intense period at work, he finds afterwards he doesn't particularly want to leave the house and he finds it very difficult to integrate back into society. But he's in one of those phases where he's out of the house and he goes to his local gym and he sees a woman who's just started there and he is mesmerized by her. She's a very powerful woman. She comes in and says she wants to be taught how to use all these machines, and she gets very cross because the trainer talks about losing weight and she is adamant that she's not there to lose weight, she's there to get strong, and he can tell that she wants to be a bodybuilder. He becomes completely infatuated with her. So we're following Elliot, and then after his section we follow Bella, who is that woman's mother, and we learn about her home life. And then the last section is following a woman called Susie, who is a colleague of this woman, and we never learn this woman's name. We never get to hear from her, or at least not inside her head. We do hear things that she says to these characters. Because we never hear from her, we also become one of these characters who is observing her, and it invites us into that othering perspective, which I thought was very well done. This is a book about connection, disconnection, body, agency, and storytelling. The woman, once she's changed her body, decides to start a YouTube channel, and on this YouTube channel she films herself meditating in a garden, and in the video description of those videos she invites her subscribers to sever ties with the world and to become isolated like her and be still. Some characters in this book interpret this as really selfish and a big problem with the world, that people don't want to confront difficult things, that they don't want to deal with arguments, and they see it as an immature way of existing. But those characters haven't got the context for what this woman has been through. She's been through lots of very traumatic things, and severing ties for her is a necessary means of survival. There's also an ironic thing to what she's doing, because she's saying, I want to be completely separate from the world, but she's also filming things and putting them up on her YouTube channel. It does have that nature element of, I'm going to silently communicate underground with people like me who understand, like a form of symbiosis. And when you have the context for why she is isolating herself, it is completely understandable. And I think that it's a really interesting discussion and reflection on a topic that is very prevalent in the world, you know, about self-preservation and setting boundaries. And this book doesn't offer really any answers to those things. It's just highlighting the complexity of these discussions, and also showing how it's very difficult for you to understand someone else's trauma without being inside their heads. This book is trying to do that without getting inside this woman's head. We're seeing 3 different people's perspectives, but all of these characters are using this woman to serve themselves. They're seeing how she feeds into their lives, like what they can get out from her. They use her as a form of photosynthesis. I think it's really brilliant. I think it is very complex, and I also quite liked how open-ended the ending was as well. It felt as though the novel was giving itself room to breathe, and I really admired that. I found it really weird reading this as someone who also creates content online, and I thought that there were a lot of conversations that could be had between these two books, you know, using fandom or the internet or a medium like creating videos where, yes, we can talk in the comment section, but we are also quite separate, using that as a way to deal with difficult things in life. I thought that there's a lot of conversation to be had in general about those things, and also between these two books. So if those discussions sound like they interest you, then I would definitely recommend picking up this. It, as I said, reminded me a lot of The Vegetarian, but it also reminded me of this, which is Picnic in the Storm by Yukiko Matoya, which is translated from the Japanese by Asa Yanida. And interestingly, Asa Yanida also translates Idle Burning. Lots of connections, accidental connections between the books that I've been reading in these past few weeks. This is called Picnic in the Storm, but the US title is The Lonesome Bodybuilder, I think, which is the title of the first story in here. Yes, The Lonesome Bodybuilder, which I reread after reading Chrysalis. I wouldn't be surprised if this had been inspired by this, which is about a woman who feels very isolated and decides that she is going to become a bodybuilder in the hope that people will notice her, which is both the same and the opposite of what is going on in here. So that was that. And then I read the Subtweet by Vivek Shraya, which was just a good time. This was a book that I hoped would be a bit like I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel, and it is. I think out of all of the ones that I read that could have been like I'm a Fan, this is the one that is the most similar. So if you are a fan of I'm a Fan and you haven't read the Subtweet yet, then I would definitely recommend picking this one up. This is about two women called Neela and Rukmini, and both of them make music. Rukmini has been a huge fan of Neela for a long time. Neela is someone who is used to creating music slowly, and she has a lot of disdain for newer artists who are being forced to release music really quickly and are using social media to promote themselves, etc. She's like, no, I don't need to do that. I want to create my own music at my pace, and if it's good, it will reach the people. Whereas Rukmini is someone who doesn't enjoy creating her own music so much. She likes doing covers of other people's songs, and she does use social media a lot. And Neela's very disdainful of what she does. She thinks that it's really shallow, until one day Rukmini covers one of Neela's songs and it becomes much bigger than Neela's version and helps Rukmini become famous. I love this book because it's so deeply uncomfortable, and all of the characters are self-centered in a very relatable way, in that they are panicking about what other people think about them all the time, and they misinterpret the situation that they're in. So one character will think the other character is thinking something about them, and then you will see the same scene from the other character's point of view, and they are equally anxious and misinterpreting the situation in a completely different way, which is very funny and also just really difficult to read in places. It makes you feel like you're the one making all of these social faux pas or having these terrible thoughts, and yeah, it definitely gets under your skin. This book explores colorism and also layers of privilege within the music industry specifically. So the first scene is Neela hosting this panel, and it's a diversity panel at a festival, and that really did make me laugh because it happens so often at festivals. The festivals are like, right, we're going to have this panel which is going to be about diversity with a capital D, and then they try and include discussions on race and queerness and disability with a group of 4 people in the space of 45 minutes. I mean, I'm talking about the publishing industry here, and it's like that's supposed to solve everything, and it's always really quite embarrassing. So yeah, the first scene in this book, sorry, I've got hair on my mouth, is Neela being invited to chair this panel at a festival, and one of the people on the panel is Rukmini, and Neela asks her a question. I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something like, what's the most important thing to you about producing music? And Rukmini says that what is so amazing to her is that she is there at all because she didn't grow up seeing people like her producing music. And Neela is furious with her saying this because she feels like Rukmini is saying that she didn't grow up seeing any brown women producing music. And Neela's like, well, I am one of those women. So basically you're saying that I don't exist. But what it turns out Rukmini is actually saying is that she didn't see any people of colour who are also trans creating music, and Neela, I think at that point, doesn't realise that she is trans. So again, feeding into this miscommunication. Neela also has these conflicting feelings at the beginning of the book where she's thinking, well, I don't want to really be associated with Rukmini because I'm a serious artist and she is not. But at the same time, maybe there's some jealousy going on because I have been taught by this white dominated music industry that two women of colour can't be successful separately. So only one of us is going to survive and I want to make sure it's me. But then also feeling like she should be supporting Rukmini because she is a fellow woman of colour, and if they can't lift each other up, then the industry isn't going to do it for them. So it's so beautifully complex. It's allowing all of these nuanced feelings to exist side by side and giving weight to all of them. It just makes it feel really realistic, like you're just swimming around someone's head and hearing all of the thoughts, the ones that they want you to hear and the ones that they don't want you to hear too. I thought that it was absolutely brilliant. So this was a really successful reading vlog. Let me collect my thoughts a second and organise the books into some kind of order of preference. Okay, so there were two books in this reading vlog that didn't work for me personally, and those were Mrs. S by Kay Patrick, which was one of the Notes on a Scandal books, and Temporary by Hilary Leichter. Now, I do have another book that fits this looking at office culture subject matter, and that is The Employees by Olga Round, and I will be reading this for a separate reading vlog in the future. So maybe this will be the book that I need, but that's for another day. After that, I did enjoy Orpheus Builds a Girl by Heather Parry, A Good Winter by Gigi Fenster, and A Touch of Jen by Beth Morgan. They're not going to be new favourites, but I did really appreciate them. Then we have the book that I don't know what to do with. This is Out by Natsuo Kirino, which I so adored until the last 100 pages. And a lot of time has passed now, well, not a lot, but at least a week since I finished reading it. And I can feel more warmly towards this book now that I have more distance from the ending. I'm not sure if that is deluded or just maybe fair, because I can contextualize it better and the ending isn't dominating all of my thoughts on the rest of the book. So yes, I think I still would recommend this book. Just be forewarned about the very icky ending. And as I said, if you've read it, I would love to talk about the ending with you. And then the last four were all books that I absolutely adored. So we have How Kyoto Breaks Your Heart by Florentyna Leow, Chrysalis by Anna Metcalfe, Rin Usami's Idol Burning and the Subtweet by Vivek Shraya. And as I get more distance from these, I'll be able to put them in some sort of order, but all of these definitely have the potential to be favourite books of, yes, the year so far, but also maybe even, you know, some of my books of all time. I would say these two especially, I absolutely adored. I would love to know if you have read any of these books. Please let me know in a comment down below, or if you're keen to pick any of them up now that you've heard me speak about them. If you're new to my channel and you like this video and you would like to subscribe, that would be lovely. See you around for future videos. And if you enjoy my content and you have the means to support me on Patreon and you would like to consider doing so, that would be amazing. Support over on Patreon allows me to keep creating free content on here for everyone. It's a platform where you can tip creators from $1, £1 a month, and there's some extra content over there as well, such as a book club, some behind the scenes writing stuff. I do bookish dingbats every month. But yeah, most of my content, 95% of my content is on this channel. But if you like this channel and you would like to support, that would be very much appreciated. Link to that is in the description box down below. I think that is everything. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're still here, give yourself a pat on the back and let's talk about books in the comment section. I will see you for another video next Sunday, and I'm sending lots of love. Bye.